Unmute the mic. Howdy! Here we go. Happy Tuesday. Glad you're here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some drumlins here. And going to place a bet that some of you are wondering what the fuck is a drumlin. Well, it's a hill, basically. Specific type of hill, a special kind of hill. Where if you look at this picture here behind me, this is Fireman's Park here in Waterloo, and you are looking at the oldest continually active baseball field in all of Wisconsin. So that's pretty cool. But then you might notice here in right field, like, what the hell is going on here? Let's see if I can swing out of the way. Look how long that left field line is and how stumpy the right field line is. Well, what the hell is going on with that? Well, for whatever reason, when they built this thing in the early 1900s, there's a huge drumlin right here where all these trees are, and it extends back off the top of the picture. There's a whole little subdivision built up on top of this thing, as in another one that I'll show you a video of in a little bit here. But basically, these drumlins are just huge depositional hills. Like, what they're made of was carried from somewhere else and deposited here by the thousands. I mean, these fucking things are everywhere. This town, Waterloo, is literally built in a swarm of them, which we'll get into again in a little bit here. But just showing you, like, I don't know, for whatever reason, they just didn't excavate these things down, and they just sort of built stuff into them. And then we'll get into looking at some of these maps here. And it'll just show you, like, normally when you go to a Google map, it's either just default one or the satellite thing. Doesn't really show you much of anything. I guess maybe in some spots you can sort of see almost like a flowingness, especially over here, just like a flowing pattern to the ground. But if you just dip into the old layers here, kicking on over terrain like bumps on a log, man. Looking, the landscape is just riddled. Each one of these lines is a drumlin, a big hill. And like I said, we're just a big old swarm of them. Here's that one in the park running right here. And then here's a subdivision built up on this one right there. And so basically, we zoom out a little bit. You'll notice with the drumlins as well, there's sort of a flowing feel to them. Like, these are sort of flowing north and south. These are going a little northeast to southwest. The more you get over here, they start turning more east-west, sort of fanning out. And one thing that it's globally, it doesn't matter where they are, here, New York, Europe, whatever, because there's drumlins worldwide. They only exist where glaciers were. So if you look over here on the left side, where like Baraboo, Sauk City, this is the start of the driftless region, where if you look, it's very hilly. There's a huge, huge chunk of Wisconsin, like all the way up into Minnesota, a little bit of Iowa, a little bit down into Illinois, just down there. But the driftless region, this big-ass area, the glaciers during the last ice age, the 4 advancements and retreats of the glacier, it never touched this driftless region for some reason. But all else around it, everywhere else around it, it did. And where it gets, there's not drumlins every single place that the glaciers were. So, like, we can go way up north in Wisconsin here, and there's not really any drumlins around here. It's just this weird rocky sort of landscape. But definitely down around where we are, I mean, this whole huge area, Beaver Dam, Watertown, over to Hartford, Poinette, DeForest, even like close into Sun Prairie, they're everywhere. Every single hill in this area is a drumlin, and the weird thing is, the debate is, how the hell did they form? Because, like I said, they're depositional, so the stuff that they're made of is not from here, came from somewhere else, and was deposited into these hills. But why would they look like this? Why would they all be sort of pointing in the same general direction in a given area that they are? So there's arguments, wind erosion and all that stuff. But I've lived here my whole fucking life, and there is not just continuously winds blowing to the northeast or the southwest. So it seems like you would need that to get all of these formed up, like they're all in like a formation. So wind erosion out of the question. It doesn't even make any fucking sense. Because again, like the wind is blowing in all directions. Like on a given day, it's going to blow north, east, west, south. Doesn't matter. So wind erosion ain't going to happen. Water erosion is got to be the only thing that makes sense. Because again, you could recreate the experiment yourself. Just go to the beach or something try to, create a little slanted thing out of the sand, just sort of shape the sand so it's slanted, and then get like a flower water or something, and then just soak that sand so you start getting flows of water. Like the channels that are cut, they're all sort of flowing in the same direction through that sand, trying to get to wherever the hell it's trying to go, the path of least resistance or whatever. Never, when you're doing this experiment, is the water just going to like magically turn and or start flowing back up. So you can tell like this was water flowing in a certain direction, but then why would they only be where the glaciers were? Why couldn't you have drumlins anywhere else? Because when the glaciers were melting, there had to have been shitloads of water just flowing all over most of this country. So the only thing that makes sense, basically, like I said, up to this driftless region, so you could sort of tell where the glacier kind of ended. Just it follows this interstate 94 going up to Minneapolis, and then down here, Highway 18. Montfort, Fenimore, Dodgeville, Barneville. That's where that wicked tornado was. But if that sort of follows the outline of that. So, like I said, no drumlins here. Never will be any drumlins there. But you get to where the glacier was actually sitting. And in the case of us in Waterloo, we're probably 50 miles, 40 miles or whatever from the edge of the glacier. So it's probably 1,000 feet, maybe more, feet thick of ice here. So imagine, and another theory would be that as the glaciers were advancing, the grinding, like the bulldozing effect of the glaciers carved these hills out. But that doesn't make sense either because they're depositional. So it can't carve something out that was deposited there at a certain point, because these drumlins, they're all made of like sandy, gravelly, clay, dirt, just junk, like nothing of any value. And it's not incorporated with any of the bedrock around here. Like, it's not like, this was all eroded from the local bedrock and somehow was deposited here in huge hills. Because, again, they are pretty big. And I can get into a video here. I tossed this hot rod together. So this is at Fireman's Park. So, how we just saw, like, the top-down view? Now we're going to swing around. And in right field over here is going to be where the drumlin is. You can see, it's pretty big, good 40 feet tall. This is a relatively small one, so I'm assuming at some point they chopped it down because there's a road that goes into the park is right there. I'll back up a little bit. But yeah, you can see there's the foul pole right here. So you actually got, it's like how Houston used to be back in the day. They had that hill in the center field that you had to climb up. So we do too. And for whatever reason, they didn't just excavate this part of the drumlin out. They sort of left it and put the outfield there. So that's Fireman's Park baseball field. This is the oldest continually used baseball field in Wisconsin. And then next we're going to show, this is sort of up at the school. The school would be behind us, the high school, elementary, and all that stuff. But this is a pretty good example. Just look on the horizon. Every single one of these hills and bumps and all that stuff is a drumlin. So you can see there's a big one right there. Two smaller ones there off on the horizon sort of overlapping. There's at least one or two right here. Another big one back on the horizon. A huge one right here. Like, this thing is gigantic. I think this is the biggest one in the area. Second biggest one was at a farm where I lived growing up, which we'll see in a minute. I got the video of that here. Even over to here, there's a drumlin. This fucking huge thing right here, this is a whole subdivision. This is Indian Hills in Waterloo. That's a huge drumlin as well. And then it'll show this view for a little bit, and then we're going to turn around facing the other way, and we're going to be flying down Hiawatha Trail, which is another subdivision that's built on top of the same drumlin that Indian Hills is on. And this will give you a good sense of how big these fucking things can get. Because like I said, that one in the park had to have been chopped down considerably because they built a road on it and all that good stuff and park amenities. So this is Hiawatha Trail coming up right here, this curved road up here. So now we are riding on top of the Drumlin, you know, facing sort of northeast-ish, flying northeast. And yeah, they're huge too. I mean, look at, there's dozens of houses up here. So they're enormous. They're long as hell. They're high or tall, pretty wide too. Because again, you know, there's houses on both sides of the road. And basically you could put another road in on the right-hand side and put a mirror image of this subdivision up here. Luckily they didn't, because as we pan around here, this is where all the school stuff is. And now you're starting to get a sense of how tall these goddamn things can be. So we are looking down considerably upon the football field there. Like the goalposts look tiny from up here. These, I believe, the Drumlins, to answer your question, and just a quick shout out to the Waterloo High School grounds crew. Look at how immaculate this grass looks. This is from last year. That looks really nice. Good job, guys. This is what I'm saying. They think, well, my theory is, okay, and now here we are at the farm I grew up on when I was a little kid, like 30 years ago. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I lived here. And so, like, this gray shed right here wasn't here. This is our horse barn. We had like 4 or 5 horses when I was growing up. It was awesome. Had a bunch of cows over here. So I remember this fence and this gate was here, and then we ran a barbed wire fence down this tree line right here, and you would not, oh my God, I was 10 years old, and there's this huge spool of barbed wire, and then you put like a pole through it, like a metal pole, and then, you know, in the tailgate or the bed box of a truck, the sidewalls of the box of a truck, there's those rectangle holes sort of in the corners. So you'd put some wooden posts in there with like U shapes on them or whatever, and then that pole rests on there and the big spool barbed wire. So then the truck would drive and unspool the barbed wire as it drove down this tree line here. And we would have to try to hold onto that and keep it from like kinking up and doing whatever on each other, and then sort of try to stretch it and hold it out while it was being attached to the, oh my God, you're just all cut to shreds because that truck is bouncing through the field, even though they're just going at a snail's pace, you know, but it's still like that barbed wire is bouncing all over, and you're a little kid trying to keep a hold of it, and adults are yelling at you, don't let it kink, and you're, oh my God, it was a disaster. So I remember putting this goddamn fence in right here when I was 10 years old. But here's this is about the second biggest drumlin in the Waterloo area. And again, look at the horizon. Huge drumlin there, another drumlin there. Just off to our left, there's another one. Off to our right, there'd be another one. Back here on the horizon, there's a couple. I mean, that's the Marshall Water Tower right there. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, this was my favorite drumlin, obviously, because I lived here and I spent countless days horsing around on this damn thing, busting rocks open, looking for stuff. Sometimes you find like little, because most of this area around here, like our bedrock and shit, is like 400 million years old. Because again, the glaciers scraped everything away. So you'd find like the ammonite type stuff. Stuff like these little guys. You'd find little fossils like that. Like none of them were really as big as this, because this was all shallow sea 400, 500, 600 million years ago. So there's a ton. That's why we got a lot of limestone, because all the sea creatures died and just built up huge layers of limestone. But yeah, look at how big these damn things are. Like these things are hundreds of yards long. They're huge. Like that clearing that we're just passing on right there. Vividly remember, just a backpack of snacks, me and my dog with my BB gun, just hanging out on this fucking drumlin right here. And then back on this side over here, like off to the right, somebody at some point in history tried excavating it. So it was super steep in one spot. So steep, like even as a little kid, it was the best sledding hill you can imagine. The speed you would get off of that shit, oh my God. But even as a little kid, like it was so steep climbing it, you could only do it like 4 or 5 times before you were exhausted. But it was as tall as this drumlin is, but steep. So you'd get some serious fucking speed. Oh, it was so much fun. Yeah, panning around here, you can see more. Like there's a big one right here that we're passing. It's got that antenna tower on it. Like I said, they're everywhere. Every single hill you see is a drumlin. One dead ahead right there off in the distance, a bunch of them on the horizon. Another one over here, this long one covered by trees. Even this one right here, it's a smaller one. Right here is another one just off to our right, and that's where our property used to go to. See if we back her up here a little bit. So it went to this tree line over here on the right, and we had all of this stuff, boom, up over onto the drumlin. And then this was a hayfield when we had it. That sort of stopped probably another 100 or so feet because you're starting to go up another hill here on the left. And this was another hayfield back there. And then from the behind view, I think, yes, our property. So this was the ending of our property line right here, this like ditch line or whatever. But this tree, like I said, this tree, because it went off to the left all the way to that other tree line when we turned around. And yeah, this little chunk back here was ours too. So it stopped and then it would sort of cut back towards the road this way. So we had like a 160 acre chunk, which was so awesome. So good exploring as a kid with my dog. Because even like, where would it be? Like back over here, the front side of the drumlin, down on the right side, there was a seasonal pond. So when all the snow would melt and run off that one side, it would fill up that pond. Right, I always got poison ivy in the spring. A bunch of shit, tons of poison ivy in that little seasonal pond. But it was cool. Like there was a trail, like a path that went through there. A couple of them, like field roads or whatever. But one of them went around the pond. One of them cut through. It was really like jungle environment as a kid. You're in this canopy of trees, but you're following this dirt path wide enough for like a tractor to get down. Oh man, I miss this place so much. This was so much fun living here. Our neighbors were total piles of shit though. They had horses that they would pull, like horse pulling competitions. And they like, this is steeper than it looks. This hill right here where the cursor is pretty fucking steep. So they'd have a sled, like a big sled type thing with all types of weights on it, and make the horses pull it up that hill to gain strength. And when the horses would get too tired or just didn't want to pull the goddamn sled up that hill, they'd beat them with chains. So when we were, I was like 10, 11, 12 when I lived here, middle of the night, we'd sneak into their horse barn and look at their horses, and they all had huge psychological issues, like nervous tics. They were terrified of people, even us little kids. Like they were just so terrified. Oh my God, we hated those motherfuckers badly. Like my dad wanted to murder all of them. They were such scumbag people. But yeah, this is where I spent a good chunk of my childhood. Best place I ever lived. I love this place so much. Building forts in the barn, all that hay in there, and oh my God, it was just so great. But these were that's drumlin videos I got to give you an idea of what's going on here, a little bit, and how these formed. My theory on how these all formed is not just my theory. I learned a lot of this shit from Randall Carlson. If you ever heard of him, he's been researching this for 30 plus years, and I discovered him probably like 7 years ago or so, and just started looking into this myself, being as how I live in a place where glaciers were. Last ice age, so it's pretty cool. And so basically what would have happened, imagine thousands of feet, at least 1,000 feet, until you get to Madison, it would taper off, into the hundreds of feet, and then however thick it would be at the termination point on this boundary with the driftless region. But where I was, basically you can assume there was at least 1,000 feet thick of ice. So I might as well show you this picture to explain how we come to the conclusion that a catastrophic event happened. So we're looking back roughly like 16 or 17,000 years over on the left side here. This is the temperature of during the Ice Age. So where's the other picture? So you can look back 100,000 years of temperature from Greenland ice cores, 100,000 years in the past. So you can see like boom, boom, boom. But this is all Ice Age. That last Ice Age was like 2.5 million years or something like that. So the 100,000 year snapshot, you can see like way down here was towards the lower end of this was the glacial times, and then for some reason, extremely wild swings. Like, unbelievable. I don't know how life could survive this with everyone. So before I get into this, I've got to preface that I'm not a climate change denier. It's impossible to be one because the only thing the climate does do is change, period. The only thing, and it is never stable. It is never the same, ever. It's either warming or cooling. End of discussion, okay? So there's no denying that the climate is changing. But look at how violent these swings were. 100,000 years. You know, it was relatively stable coming in, but it was still getting pretty goddamn cold, and it'd warm up, get cold. But then all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Back and forth, like what the, okay, stable and ice, cold as hell ice age conditions again. Another big spike. So what we get over to the closer ones here where we were, 15,000 years ago on this other picture right here. So now we're getting up towards the end of that 100,000 years, and something happened where like 14,500 years ago, there was another one of them massive spikes into warmer temperatures. And this is like 15, 18, maybe even 20 degree Fahrenheit increase in a couple decades. And if you look over on the right here, this is where we are. Dotted line, present temperature. So you can even see back medieval warm period. So, back in the time when Rome was ruling the earth, all that stuff. Even the medieval warm period, I think that's when the Renaissance was happening and Germany was built and all them Gothic churches all over the place. And then boom, we crashed down into the mini ice age, which from like the mid 1300s up until like 1840 or 1830, that was the longest stretch of reglaciation since the actual last ice age. And this was documented human history, not that long ago. The 1300s were not that long ago. People were writing shit down and taking note of their surroundings. It's not like they were 50,000-year-old idiots without any type of way to write shit down or anything. So they documented this extremely thoroughly. And while this mini ice age was coming on, because again, it was just a rapid descent, several degrees, maybe 5 degrees or whatever in cooling, they were noticing like the glaciers advancing like around Switzerland or Scandinavian countries, like recording the documented history from up there. They were saying like they were losing tillable farmland because the fucking glaciers were advancing towards them. There's, artist renderings from back then of what the shit used to look like. And then just in this course of a couple hundred years, ice had started to retake a lot of the northern environments. And people were getting concerned about it. They were wondering, like, what the fuck is causing this? Like, what the hell is going on here? And then for absolutely no reason, in the early, 1830, 1840, boom, the climate starts rebounding. And then they start taking note again, like, oh my God, okay, so now they're starting to retreat. Our crops are faring better, all that good stuff. So now our baseline for what the fanatics and the alarmists want to make you think is the end of the world with this climate change, our baseline was the mini ice age, which we are rebounding and warming out of. And everyone is sounding the alarm like, oh my God, we're fucked. We're all going to die. I've been hearing this shit since I was a little kid in the 80s. Like, oh, it's going to be so warm by the year 2000. All the glaciers are going to be gone. Florida's going to be totally underwater. Okay, so here we are, 30, 40 fucking years later. We're still doing about exactly the same as we were when they were sounding the alarm bells 40 fucking years ago. And if you can clearly see right here, for the past 10,000 years, Earth's, by the way, magically, this is the most stable Earth's climate has been for as long as we can see. You can look back 5, 6, 700,000 years, and Earth's climate has never been this stable for this long. This is 10,000 years of climate stability that is unprecedented. Because again, just fucking look back. This is 100,000 years of Earth's climate history. Look it on the right here. This is that last 10,000 years. Unbelievably stable climate and warm for some reason. Now, were humans to blame? Was burning fossil fuels to blame 10,000 years ago? Or actually 14,000 years ago when this big-ass spike happened? And then for some reason, over the next couple centuries, it dipped back down into full-on glacial times for the next 12 to 1300 years. And then boom, another shot of 15 degrees Fahrenheit spike in Earth's temperature very rapidly. Like, shocking. We're worried about 2 degrees Fahrenheit over 200 years, and that's supposed to be the end of the Earth, when you can clearly fucking see what life on Earth... Dude, our ancestors were alive during all of this. Every single one of us had ancestors alive somewhere on Earth during all of this. And they managed to survive just fine. Yet here we are in 10,000 years of climate stability that is unprecedented. It's the anomaly is what we're living in now. This stability of the climate is the anomaly. Not us warming up a couple degrees, because that just doesn't make any fucking sense, where you can see massive swings. Like, look at these two back here, like 70,000 years ago. Good God. That has got to be like 20 fucking degrees swing easily. I don't get it. So ignore the alarmists. I think this is just like a Democrat or a liberal dog whistle that just gets the base riled up and pays attention. Just like if you're a Republican or a dumb MAGA Trump head or whatever, just hearing the words Hillary's emails throws you into this frenzy where, now I'm riled up. I swear to God, climate change is that trigger word for Democrats. But it doesn't make sense. A couple of degrees warming is not going to kill anything. Yes, there's going to be species that can't adapt, but the change is going to happen regardless of what we do. Look at what the change used to be. Look at what the change used to be. I'll say it again because everyone is so fucking dumb now. You got to repeat things until you beat it in their head. Look at what the change used to be. What we're living in now is 10,000 years of a miracle that has somehow kept our climate as stable as it has ever been. And here we are now, cooler by several degrees than most of recorded history for the past 10,000 years. So do you think the Romans, or when Genghis Khan was conquering everything, when the Egyptians were building all the pyramids, do you think they were so concerned about how warm the planet was? And oh my God, it's pretty warm, guys. We're all going to be dead within the next 30 years. Look at how much warmer it was. This dashed line is the current average temperature of the Earth. And we're concerned that a couple degrees is going to kill everyone. It's insane. When you can clearly look back, these are from ice cores in Greenland. They trap everything. What particles were in the air? Did massive forest fires happen? Because again, remember, for a raindrop or snowflake or a chunk of hail to form, it has to connect to something, some type of debris. So it's all recorded in these ice layers. The temperature, the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, nitrogen levels, all that shit. It's recorded in these ice cores. And here we are with unprecedented stability. So ignore obviously it's not a good idea to pump poisonous chemicals into our atmosphere because we're breathing that fucking air. But is a couple of degrees warming going to kill everyone? No, absolutely not. And here's where you can see where the younger Dryas is, this weird 12 to 1300 year stretch of reglaciation that was shot back out of again by another one of these just massive spikes. We're talking 15 to 20 degree Fahrenheit spikes in the Earth's temperature. And it didn't kill everything. This one did. This last one did, because it coincides with the dying off of like 35 or 40 megafauna species, mammals more than 100 pounds. They're gone. Man, the United States used to have a plethora. It was like Africa on steroids. The diversity was greater. We had at least 2 different species of lions. Where the United States is now, just like 15,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age. 4 different types of proboscideans, or the mammoths, which the woolly mammoth being, I think, the smallest one out of all 4 of them. There was the Mammothus imperator, was huge, like 18 feet tall at the shoulder. It's this huge elephant that lived back then. And then you got your mastodons, the saber-toothed cats, the giant ground sloth that when it stood up on its hind legs was 15 feet tall. South America had an armadillo with the shell of its body was the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. I mean, two different species of cave bears that make polar bears look like a little cute stuffed animal. They were so big. The skull size is like 4 times the size of grizzly bear skulls. The cave bear and the short-faced bear. And well, I think the saber-toothed cats may have died off like 50,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, but almost all of these other species, these massive, huge, they were gigantic mammals that lived in, Canada, the United States, Mexico, Central America, down into South America, and even over into Europe and Asia. Like, what does Asia have left? Some cats, big cats, tigers and lions and shit, and the elephants. Africa's got like the giraffes, the rhinos, the hippos, and lions and stuff like that. That's about it. Man, up until this, because you can see in the fossil records, which is what this picture is showing right here. This is the black mat layer. This is a picture taken in Arizona. So this is the black mat layer, or the Younger Dryas boundary right here. This is about 14,000 years ago. And this is worldwide. If the environment is right, where you can dig down and correctly date it to about 14,000 years ago, you will find traces of this black mat layer globally. So there had to have been something devastating on Earth happening 14,000 years ago that would have triggered this first huge spike. And there's also evidence that, so at the peak of the Ice Age, there was so much ice sitting on top of Canada, North America, over into Europe, that sea levels would have been about 300 to 400 feet lower. Usually what I hear is around 300 feet. So if you want to average it, 350 feet lower. So if you take that into consideration, most of the continental shelf globally would have been dry land, which is probably why we don't find basically any human remains from anywhere from this time, because they would probably be living close to the coasts like most people do right now. And when all the glaciers melted, it just washed everything away. And now it's submerged under hundreds of feet of water in most places around the world. So good luck finding it. But a huge influx of water into the ocean coincides with this. It's called meltwater pulse A, or meltwater pulse 1A or A. So huge spike in temperature, a ton of water returned back to the oceans. Obviously had to have been from the glaciers melting. Then it got cold again for some reason for 12 to 1300 years down here, which this reglaciated time period is called the Younger Dryas. 11,600 to 12,800. Now it's kind of most up-to-date things are, it's pushing 12,900 years before present. And then all of a sudden, boom, something again just snaps the Earth's climate out of the glaciation for, as far as we can tell right now, for good. Because again, we got about 11,000 years of no glaciers now, just out of the blue, when it was millions of years, glaciers. So it's completely unexplained because again, you could look back on this, and here it is, just swinging all over the place. Glaciers way down here, getting close to, non-glaciated. Still cold as hell. This whole time, it was still cold as hell, because you could see it's nothing close to present-day temperatures. You're still several degrees away. So it is glaciers the whole time. This may coincide or may not with the actual advancement and retreating, because that shit took hundreds of thousands of years each time. It was 4 times the glaciers appeared, then they would retreat and then re-advance, retreat, re-advance. Did that 4 times over 2.5 million years. But then again, like, this is the anomaly, because this first spike 14,000 years ago almost went from full-on glaciation to nearly present-day temperature in the blink of an eye, which is totally unexplained. And now let's get into what I consider to be some pretty crucial evidence. So the theory is that something caused the glaciers to melt extremely rapidly, and we are talking maybe a couple hundred years and they were gone. Where if you just, the earth is warming up and all that stuff, and then they're just naturally melting away. If that was the case, they would still be there today. It should take like 30,000 years, because we're talking some spots up here where the center mass of the glacier would be around Hudson Bay. We're talking 3 miles thick of ice around here. And don't forget that all of Canada was under ice. A little bit of Alaska was, but sea levels were so low that we look on here, this light blue part, the continental shelf, almost all of this would have been dry land because the sea level, so much fucking ice was sitting on top of mostly Canada, but, even down into all this stuff here, up into Maine, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all that good stuff. Greenland, of course, even on the other side, Sweden, Finland, all that stuff, this part would be glaciated. Oddly enough, most of Siberia was a lush grassland where they find most of the mammoth bones when something killed millions of them in the blink of an eye too, and you can throw that overhunting bullshit right out the window because, again, if there was as many humans creeping around Earth as there were animals, we find no fossilized remains of humans from this time period. They're just gone. It's like they all magically disappeared and then poof, suddenly they re-emerge again out of nowhere. But there's endless amounts of, there's millions and millions of mammoths found, and all that Siberian permafrost and shit. So that was the thing I was taught when I was a little kid. Like, oh, they would just, with the hunter-gatherers with their spears would round up a bunch of mammoths and then run them all off a cliff. And then that's how they'd get their meat. But if you know anything about hunting or like slaughtering animals, the last thing you want to do is damage that body in any way. So making them run off of a cliff to kill themselves would destroy. I mean, these are several ton animals here. It's not like throwing a little rabbit off a cliff and it's going to hit the rocks and it's dead and like, hey, let's go eat that rabbit. This thing is going to be pulverized. Its internal organs are going to be all ripped apart, man. You get piss and shit mixed in with the meat, it's ruined. You're going to make yourself sick if you eat that shit. The way they would hunt them is dig a little ditch that was just deep enough because, again, elephants can't jump. So just deep enough that you can coerce them to like funnel them into, they fall into this pit that you dug. And now it's just like knee height on an elephant. So they could probably see out of the pit just fine, but they can't jump or really climb up to get out. And then you just stab them to death. So it makes so much sense. There's no damage to the meat or anything. You're not going to rip the bladder or the intestines open and spoil everything. You just spent a ton of energy on trying to round up in the first place. So this overhunting and so not only the millions and millions and millions of elephants that there were, humans apparently killed off all the dangerous lions, the other fucking saber-toothed cats, those enormous bears that again make a polar bear look like a silly little stuffed animal joke. These bears were fucking monstrous, man. We're talking bigger than a horse. These fucking bears were. And humans hunted all these to extinction. Get the fuck out of here. Only an idiot would believe that. So there has to be something. The theory that I agree with is that a comet, we saw it with Shoemaker-Levy 9 back in 94 or whenever that was, that comet that broke apart and smashed into Jupiter in a bunch of fragments. That's got to be what happened here on Earth. And the best theory would be that it just peppered the hell out of Canada, maybe even parts over in Europe if, the train of debris was long enough, just as the Earth's rotation was happening, just these objects from space are hitting it. But as the only thing that can melt these glaciers as fast as they did, because again, if you took the temperature at the equator, that average yearly temperature, and obviously we know it wasn't the case, but let's say you just spread that over all of the Earth. So now that the glaciers up here in Canada are all basking in this 88-degree weather every year, 365 days a year, it's always warm, right? Which, again, is obviously not the case. We have climate data for hundreds of thousands of years going back that obviously wasn't the case. But the people, like the mainstream theory would be that, Earth warmed up and then the glaciers just melted on their own. But you can calculate, there's fucking mathematical equations to calculate the melting rate of ice. You could break it down in numerous ways, joules, calories, however you want to fucking do it. And it would take 30,000 years if the average temperature at the equator was spread out globally, which again, it is not. And obviously the glaciers are gone. We can travel Canada and realize that the glaciers aren't fucking there. So how did they melt? Earth's ambient temperature is not warm enough to just melt them on its own. Something had to make them melt extremely fast. And if we start taking a look here, the theory, I'll finally get to it, the theory on how drumlins were formed was massive subglacial flooding. So while the glaciers were still sitting here over Wisconsin, Canada, New York, Montana, all that good shit, something happened probably somewhere over Canada because it's thick as hell. And as far as we can tell now, there have been no confirmed impact craters found yet. But again, if there's 2 or 3 miles of ice, even something traveling 60,000 miles an hour, broken up comet fragments, it's going to bust that ice all to shit, generate unimaginable amounts of heat, but it may not have enough force. That ice shattering may absorb enough energy where the impactor doesn't have enough kinetic energy left to actually create a ditch in the earth. But it could still inflict massive amounts of damage just hitting the ice sheet. We've seen just 2013 or whatever Chelyabinsk was. That thing exploded like 15 miles in the atmosphere. You could, all the dash cams, you see it get really bright. That was it exploding. And then like 15 minutes later or whatever it was, the shock wave, like the sound, boom, all them explosions fucking hit, blown out windows, blown out garage doors. That thing was miles up, and it exploded. And look at the fucking damage it did. 1,500 people injured, had to go to the fucking hospital and that thing was small too, man. That Chelyabinsk meteor that exploded was not very big. And look at what that fucking thing did, just exploding like 15 miles up, just skimming across our atmosphere. If that would have came and made a direct impact over a city, so like, what was it? The Tunguska from 1908, the same parallel or latitude line on Earth, had it showed up like 4 or 6 hours later, would have hit, I think, St. Petersburg, Russia. And had that happened, that was another air burst. It exploded up in the atmosphere. It never made impact with Earth. So there's no crater there at all. But you could see that some dude, Soviet, went there in, I think, the 1920s, sometime around there. So they waited a good long time, almost 20 fucking years before they went. Because there was, farmers living in that region. They noted like, oh yeah, these huge explosions and like there's trees everywhere. 800 square miles of trees were just flattened, like blown apart in a blast pattern. You could see that they're all splayed apart from each other, like matchsticks just tipped over for 800 square miles. And that thing didn't fucking hit the earth either. It just exploded up in the air. So you can't even imagine how much force would be released by something smashing into the glaciers themselves. How much heat would be generated. How much ice. My God, the debris that would be launched into the air, which on future episodes, I'll keep doing more of these. We'll start getting into the fucking Carolina Bays, where if you look, like Saginaw, Michigan, may be an impact site. This place right here, you can even see it's got a circular thing and like a second almost ring around it. That's interesting. There's also the Nebraska Bays. So you look at the Nebraska Bays, they all point, you make lines on them because they're all oriented in the same direction, similar to what these drumlins are. You look at them, they're all pointing in the same direction. There's never ever cases where they're turned. They're always orientated in the same direction. The ones in Nebraska point right to fucking Saginaw, Michigan. The ones in the Carolina, these go all the way from like parts of New Jersey all the way down the eastern seaboard into Georgia. The Carolina Bays, and they are fucking everywhere. Like, look, there's a shitload of them right here. Can you see them? You see all these ovals? These have water in them, but tiny little oval there, there, boom, boom, boom. Carolina Bays. Look at them everywhere. My goddamn cursor's going. Some of them are so big they built fields in them. Some of them are impacts within impacts. Look, there's 3 of them right here. Here's a great example. Look at this shit. They're everywhere. And my theory for this is, because again, if you try to draw the lines on a 2-dimensional map like this, it's not going to be pointing in the right direction. You have to do it on a spherical globe and then trace the lines. And every single one of these Carolina Bays points to Saginaw, Michigan. Once you get up towards the New Jersey area, they're not as north-south as the ones in North Carolina are. They're more, east-west, pointing at Saginaw, Michigan, as if something, because again, this would have been thousands and thousands of feet of glacial ice covering this. And if it's true that a comet broke apart and started just peppering like a fucking shotgun blast onto that ice sheet of Canada, imagine the force of something smashing into this ice sheet, blasting unimaginable amounts of ice up. So it would be all blasting out on a specific trajectory. And it just happens to be raining down in South Carolina and literally making it all the way to Nebraska. And if you kind of drew a circle in too, like that would be an out, like the edge radius of a blast coming from there. So if it's a coincidence, that is pretty fucking amazing coincidence. But something formed these, and again, they try to say wind erosion. Why the fuck the wind does not always just blow in North Carolina in this direction, okay? It just doesn't. There's always like north wind, south wind. I've even heard stupid shit that, these used to be like prehistoric, almost like tide pools where they would be filled with water. So like their own individual big lakes and fish swimming in a circle. Because why the fuck would fish do that? None of that shit makes sense. These are impact craters, for goddamn it. Look at them. They all have the southeast edge of the ring is all higher on each and every one of them. It's built up higher than the leading edge would be, indicating a impactor coming in at a specific angle and like hitting that, and it's like you blast a little bit of that, like when you go to the beach and throw a baseball into the sand at an angle. The backside of that pit it makes is going to be higher than the front side. It's common fucking physics, man. And there are hundreds of thousands of these bays. I mean, there's so many of them that they've, worked the land over them. There's two of them overlapping right here. One hit, and then the next one just like, boom, boom, impactors, one after another. Got to be millions of them raining down in this area. So there's one reason why it seems to make sense, like there would be an impact. Second would be up here. Okay, now this is where it starts to get a little interesting. So this is Lake Nipigon in Canada, okay? And we can kick around over to some LiDAR maps here. So now we're going to get some good topographical information. And I like to use this elevation tinted hill shade where it'll show you. So like, the cream color is higher than the green color, but now starting to get into this yellowish color is higher than the cream color. So it seems like for most of the way, especially on the west side and the south of what this land was pretty much higher than where this lake is now. And if we zoom in, you can see clearly as if an impactor hit this right here, created a hole in the ice, which again would have released, you can't even imagine it in your head how much energy would be released in an impact like this happening. So imagine you got maybe a mile thick of ice right here. Something smashes into it, creates an enormous hole with got to be millions and millions and millions of tons of ice being blasted out. And if there's a bunch of them, that's why that one in Michigan would be raining down in North Carolina. Something hits here. All that heat created is going to melt shitloads of that ice. Imagine a mile thick. It's hard to even imagine a mile thick of ice because we have nothing to compare that to. But imagine something punches through a mile of ice at like 60,000 miles an hour. And it's big. It's a big chunk of something. If it's a comet, which would make more sense why it never made it down to bedrock. Because obviously a comet's not as solid as like a chunk of iron flying through space at 60,000 miles an hour. But something hit here. Huge hole. A lot of heat. Ocean level currents of fucking ice being melted. Backfilling that hole. Right? Because that's what it would do. There's a void. Water, just like electricity, wants to follow the path of least resistance. And you can even see, like, it looks like it washed out the side here. Like, you can see these lines where it looks like water was flowing through and cutting these channels out. Down here, it is clear as day. Water was just pouring out of here for some reason. And this is the washout debris. That fucking mountain, or not a mountain, it's not that high, but this high ridge that used to sweep right across the south here is sitting right here. All of that was cut out by water, and it's sitting out here in Lake Superior. All right? Now, if you're wondering, well, how could water do that? I'll show you one in Wisconsin where it is fucking clear as day that is what happened. Where are you? Devil's Lake, right? Okay. Let's go back to there. Look at this shit. This was a whole high, tall ridge here. Because now we're, like I said, we're starting to get, this is back in Wisconsin. This is the edge of the glacier, was riding right along this highway right here. Right there, Interstate 90. So on the east side, glacier. West side, no glacier. So now the glacier is melting extremely rapidly. And we are in the driftless region here. These hills are no joke, man. These are huge, and they're rock. It's not depositional garbage like the Drumlins are. Like, this is almost mini mountains here, all over western Wisconsin. It's absolutely gorgeous, by the way. And here you go at Devil's Lake State Park. You can see somehow, I mean, that's what water will do. If there was a crack or some fissure of some type in this huge chain of hills here, it will exploit that weakness, because you got to imagine hundreds of feet deep, 500-600 feet deep water sheeting across Wisconsin, because something is making these glaciers melt very rapidly, and that water has got to go somewhere. So it's desperately trying to get out from under these glaciers, forming these drumlins, because now all of that, the pressure of the water flowing subglacially is insane. It's got to be so much fucking water pressure, and it's not just clean water, it's taking everything with it. That much water under that much pressure is scraping up and carrying everything with it. So now it has like sandblasting force, but at the same time, it's leaving these depositional drumlins all over the place. And where you get close to the termination point, damn it, I had pins in here to make them easy to find. Let's see if I can, my places. Wisconsin floods. Okay. Right, these things right here. Here you can clearly see where the boundary was, where the glaciers ended. So on this right side, glaciers. Over here, no glaciers. And already you can see like massive amounts of water were flowing over this left side. And there's a lot of this stuff. Huge, huge, ancient, like these, look at, this is the Wisconsin River, man. Like, that's a decent sized river. It's not very deep. It's a lot of sandy shoals and whatever they're called in it. But look at how much bigger. This thing is like 3 miles wide. How wide that river valley used to be. How much water used to be flowing through here. Desperately, coming from the termination point of the glaciers. Hooks north, cuts back right. Boom. This is where an outlet would be for water. Here's another one up here. There's another one right here. And then I believe a smaller one up here. There's like 4 or 5 of them in Wisconsin where it's clear as day. Although there was no glaciers here in the driftless region, there was a shitload of water flowing through here. And the only way that much water to cut these massive river valleys out, I mean, these are fucking huge river valleys. If we can get a... see, there's too much vegetation. It's so hard to see this shit in Wisconsin, which is why it's nice that the LiDAR maps exist, because it shows up just clear as day. Like, look at these. Here they are. This is the Wisconsin River one right there. Like, one of them is the Chippewa River or the St. Croix River or some shit. But you can see them just desperately cutting huge channels in these massive rolling hills made of rock. They're not like they're made of sand and easy to wash away. It is cutting through like solid fucking rock, desperately trying to get to the Mississippi River to drain all of this water out as the glaciers. And it would be water coming from north up in Canada subglacially, coming out, trying to get out from under the glacier. And that's where you can see on these pins here where the termination point of the glacier is. It's like channels were cut. Like this is probably 30, 40 feet lower than the rest of the surrounding area. And you could imagine like this is where, because a lot of them have, this one up here is a good example. Look at these other bodies of water leading up. And it's showing you the direction that that water was flowing in. So there's a channel here where it's like this would have been just that subglacial flooding under extreme pressure blasting out the front of the glacier, the termination point. You can imagine it just shooting like a massive industrial sprinkler, just like Niagara Falls volumes of water coming out. And it's clear as day, like water, why on earth would we have an east to west cut lake in Wisconsin if not for subglacial water flowing that direction, desperately trying to get out from under the glacier? There's another channel right there, a channel right there, channel right there. They're fucking everywhere. A little one right here was forming. There's that one that I pinned. There's another one right there. Just boom, water just shooting out of that motherfucker. And wouldn't you know it, on the other side of where that water was shooting out, you have evidence of massive amounts of water rapidly trying to get into the Mississippi River drainage as fast as it could. There's no reason why you would have east-west flowing forks of like all lined up in a row. Like, why on earth? What? Show me the time period when that was the normal thing to be happening on Earth. This is clearly like shitloads of water just coming out. Look at even up here. There's more of them. There's at least 72 of these channels where it would have been subglacial water just blasting out from under the glacier at pressures and speeds like, well, the speed probably would have, 60, 70 miles an hour, but under pressures that you cannot believe. So that's, the water flowing subglacially. You'd think there would be more than just maybe some drumlin evidence and some of these termination points and like the water channels trying to flow into the Mississippi River Valley, all that stuff. Well, good God, we're just getting into it now. So the main map, even the topography map on Google Maps doesn't show it, but the satellite view does. Remember this little beast right here? And there might actually be several other ones as well that need to be looked into. But it's hard to tell because if you look around here, a lot of Canada looks like this, like it's a sponge. So it's hard to tell like what would be like maybe a depression from where the ice was impacted. It's very hard to tell. But what is not hard to tell is that this is clearly cut out by water currents. This is Lake Superior, okay? There is no insane north to south current that does a pattern like this in Lake Superior. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at all. This would have to have been whether, it would come, this Lake Nipigon right here would be one of them dumping incredible amounts of stuff. Because again, here's that sediment. This all used to be on the southern edge of this lake right now. Used to be right here. It's sitting right here in Lake Michigan. This is all deposited into Lake Michigan from here. How the fuck does that happen if not for ocean level currents? I'm telling you, it's not like any type of flood you've ever seen. The ice dam theory, like, oh, well, there was a big ice dam that blocked a bunch of water and filled up back here in Ontario and it broke. Bullshit. Ice is not that strong. Ice is not dam strength, okay? Yeah, you can put a lot of weight on ice and like compress it, but if you have a several mile wide chunk of ice that is very tall, picture the Hoover Dam being made of ice. That ain't holding shit back as far as water is concerned, man. Ice does not have that type of strength. It just doesn't. I mean, let's fucking be realistic here. So you see it. And of course, there wasn't a lake here when it was the glacier. It was glacier here. So subglacially, shitloads, I'm telling you, ocean level currents of water had to have been flowing subglacially, cutting these deep. These are fucking deep channels being cut in the bedrock of Lake Superior. No other phenomenon on Earth can achieve this. It has to be water under extreme pressure, moving very fast. And it shows it up over here too. So let's say you got a couple impacts over here in this area. Now this is trying to drain as much former glacier ice turned into water in the blink of an eye as fast as it possibly can. And you can clearly see, again, there is no underwater currents that would cut channels in bedrock in these lakes. This is clear as day. Water was flowing rapidly under extreme pressure, subglacially, and it's written in the stone. Even Lake Michigan has some of these fucking features. Clear as day. There had to have been something impacting the ice sheet in Canada that caused massive amounts of water or ice to melt into water, filling them impact holes. And so let's say you got 1 or 2 miles thick of ice. How much that water pressure would be at the bottom of that impact hole? It's going to try to get out from under that ice in any way humanly possible. And we're seeing the evidence of it. It seems like where near the source would be, it's the strongest, the deepest of the cuts. You know, the bedrock of these Great Lakes, man, it's no joke. It takes incredible amount of force to cut through bedrock. It's not like this is made of sandstone here. Like, it's got to be, again, this is very old Earth, and we were shallow sea 400, 500, 600 million years ago. So it's got to be some type of limestone or dolomite or something. It's very strong rock, cut through like nothing. Subglacial flooding under extreme pressure and speed. No other explanation for how these glaciers disappeared so fast, how all these water, you can tell these channels are from water. What, it ain't wind erosion. It's underwater, man. It was under ice the whole time. It has to be water. Drumlins don't just magically get formed by wind. That has to be water flowing and depositing this material for reasons unknown. But say you go to a frozen lake or whatever during the winter, try to smash out a big chunk that you can flip upside down and look at the bottom of that ice that was sitting on the water. It is not smooth and mirror-like like the surface may be. It's almost like somebody took a spoon with, the curved part and just pushed up into the bottom of the ice and made all these little dome shapes throughout the ice, right? That's just, you can do that experiment this winter. Go to the shore of a frozen lake, try to take a hammer with you, bust off a good disc, shaped piece, square, whatever the fuck you want, piece of ice, and flip that bitch upside down. It's going to be like wavy and stuff like that with maybe like sort of upside down spoon shaped concave shapes in it. That's just how flowing water makes those shapes, right? And oh my God, wouldn't you know it? Its drumlins are elongated, but for the most part, they have a blunted leading edge, like the front of a spoon, and then a tapered tail end, like a minnow shape, just like a fucking flowing water would make them into that shape. So now let's say it's a glacier, extreme amounts of pressure, and that water is trying to get through. So any weak spots in that glacier, it's exploiting and eroding. So it would make sense that it would make, because you can see some of these are in a row, some of them are side by side, some of them have like a split tail. I'll show you that one on the farm where I lived. Where the hell's, there's Waterloo. It has a split tail. It's this one right here. But you can see this one kind of does too. But see how they're all in the same direction? Has to be flowing water depositing these under the ice sheet in those little pockets. Like just like on the lake ice, flip it upside down. It's not smooth. It's going to be wavy. So it would give an opportunity at least for the sediments to build up, because obviously they did, because the sand, gravel, and clay that they're made of is not from this area. It came from somewhere else up north and was deposited here. Again, by the tens of thousands. And they're all over, like even going even farther up north. They get a little harder to find, but there's still patches of them. And then you get actually into rock eroding. Like this is an old river channel too. Look at how tiny the current one is that's in there now. What an absolute joke to the monstrosity that had to have cut this out. Does it give us elevation? So near the top of this ridge is 1,000 feet. I don't know what the current, most of Wisconsin is like 700 to 800 feet above sea level. So if the top of this ridge is nearing 1,000 feet, this has got to be 200-foot tall cliffs. And you can see like this, had the water kept going, this would have been washed away at some point too, as well as this stuff. All of this type of shit that's just left over, weird, like how would this stuff even get here? Water erosion. Hundreds and hundreds of feet deep of water going extremely fast as these glaciers were melting. And it's seriously, the glaciers could have been gone in just a few hundred years. Because again, Earth's ambient temperature would take tens of thousands of years to melt them, at least 30,000 years to melt them. And we can clearly see that they're gone. So something obviously melted them way faster than just Earth's ambient temperature. And again, you can look back at these climate data maps. There's nothing recorded that would have shown like, oh yeah, it spiked by 300 degrees for 20 years for some reason, and boom, the glaciers melted. Nope. There was this first one here. It coincides with meltwater pulse 1A, and then it went back down into glaciation for about 1,300 years, and then boom, shot up again 11,600 years ago. This is meltwater pulse 1B. When the remainder, basically, of the glaciers, leading on up into this modern time here, were rapidly, to even still, like, you're obviously just look at the goddamn thing where Earth's temperature is. There's not 30,000 years of time that has elapsed here. It's not even 5,000 years from when the glaciers were here about 15,000 years ago to coming out of it. We can say 12,000 or let's say 11,000 years ago. 4,000 years, them fucking glaciers were gone, when it should take 30,000 with just Earth's ambient temperature. Something obviously happened that put a lot of heat into those glaciers, basically in the blink of an eye, in a geological instant that happened. And like I said, don't forget about this black mat layer. This is right at the Younger Dryas boundary line. Down here, below this black line, you get all that megafauna, the lions, the cave bears, the fucking giant armadillo or giant ground sloths. We had several species of horses in the United States. Woolly rhinos lived here. Gone. All of them gone. Not a single fossil has ever been found anywhere on Earth above this black mat layer of any of those species. How the fuck does this happen? How does this deposit? Because there's iridium in here, there's nanodiamonds, there's melt spherules of iron that only are formed in high velocity, high heat impact environments on Earth. They don't just naturally occur on Earth. Something has to smash into Earth with extreme speed and force for these things to be formed. Shock quartz, exactly what it sounds like. Something has to smash in with so much force that the quartz atoms themselves get fucking rearranged in that impact. That does not naturally happen on Earth. It is an impact that causes that. And it was an impact that melted the glaciers. It was an impact that killed 35 to 40 species of megafauna, including the Clovis people, because they just magically fucking disappeared. We found their tools, we found their art and pottery and shit like that. After this boundary line, the black mat layer, the Clovis people are gone. No trace of them, not even a bone fragment has been found. But we know they existed. Could they have been washed away in the floods? Who knows? It kind of seems like that's how a large amount of these animals were killed, especially when you find thousands of mammoths all dead, piled up in a pile. And there's also a couple examples of mammoths. One of them, specifically, was flash frozen. How? Do you have any idea the amount of heat energy being generated by a woolly mammoth to begin with? Even if you put that in a freeze-dry freezer of today, I mean, it would probably take days to solidly freeze that thing through and through. Because again, it's got all of its fur on. It was just alive. You would have to put it in that freezer, kill it, and then, see how quickly it would freeze. These things were frozen in a matter of hours. Some of them with food, still chewing the food in their mouth, undigested food in their stomach, blown back with their hips and back legs smashed as if they were blown back in such a manner, and then had to have been rapidly buried. One of them in specifically that this happened to, the one that was blown back with the shattered rear hips and broken legs with the food, still chewing food in its mouth, undigested food in its stomach, was found, it had an erection when it died, which means that it was asphyxiated at some point. So it had to have been close to something, massive amounts of earth being thrown upon it, because again, you have to be pretty much buried very quickly in order to be fossilized, or to, in the case of some mammoths, if they're young enough, it's the actual mammoth. Like, they haven't even become fossilized yet. But to be preserved in that manner, you got to get oxygen out of the equation real quick. And that's what these violent events would do. You can't even imagine how much debris is being blasted up out of not just ice, but Earth itself. In certain cases, it had to have been impacting the ground itself. Massive amounts of debris flying all around. Animals, shockwaves, floods. Literally, the end of the world was happening for whatever was alive during this. Like, leading up to whatever put this layer of, and it's not black because the earth was on fire and it's carbon, like, it's just organic material, thick layer of organic material there. But in that layer, like just below that layer, is where you find all of the impact proxies, nanodiamonds, microspherules, like the iron spherules, shock quartz, all types of shit. Like iridium or platinum, you find traces of platinum in this layer. Can only come from an impact, period. I can't believe that people still think that this was, oh, we just overhunted the most dangerous giant. Would you think about it? All you got are spears, man. That's it. Maybe those sort of like things where you could, whatever it's called, atlatl or whatever, we could like whip something at them. But that's it. You don't have guns, obviously. Like, your spear is your fucking knife. And we're supposed to believe that these groups of people, maybe like packs of 150 people at the most, there couldn't have been more than 10 or 20 million people worldwide at this time, all right? Living conditions were rough. We are in full glaciation times leading up to this black mat layer, all right? So life on Earth is not easy. There's not going to be billions of people just creeping all around. Just surviving the winter has got to be so fucking hard, you can't even imagine it. You constantly have to keep killing your food because there's no refrigeration or nothing. Like, I don't even know if they've figured out preserving meat with salt at this time yet. But anyway, life was rough. So there was not very many fucking people to begin with. So the notion that they killed off, hunted to extinction, faster than they could all of these species, faster than they could reproduce globally. For some reason, the humans alive at the time just got the wild hair up their ass to like, let's kill them all. Make them all extinct. That is such a stupid fucking theory. It's unbelievable. Childish in its ignorance. So that's the only logical explanation for so much of this stuff. For the drumlins, like I said, for these massive river valleys being cut out. Oh, you want to see something else crazy? Oh, it's Nebraska. You ever gone to the beach or like a river, like a shallow river or something, and you can see like ripples in the, whether it's pebbles or sand or something, like flowing water makes ripples on the floor of whatever the beach or the river or whatever it may be. See this tan colored area of Nebraska? When I zoom in, it's going to look like a giant put a thumbprint in the fucking land. These are current ripples. Look at this, starting to come into view. Now, you want to explain to me what type of phenomenon would cause this to happen in Nebraska if it is not flowing water, flowing over this landscape and creating these ripples as the water level receded. Obviously, when it was deep, because I'm telling you right now, there was so much ice sitting up here on Canada, and Greenland and little bits of Europe and the Nordic countries, that when it melted, sea levels rose by 300 to 400 feet. Think about how much ice has to be miles, up to 3 miles thick at Hudson Bay, that ice was. And Canada is fucking huge, man. All of that melting rapidly, like I said, something's got to cut those channels at the bottom of these lakes. That is subglacial water flowing. No doubt about it. Nothing. Name one other thing on Earth that could cause that. The bedrock of a lake. Take all the fucking time you need. You will never come up with a different thing other than subglacial water cutting that out under extreme pressure and speed. But it wasn't just limited to Wisconsin, man. Like I said, the whole thing of Canada was glaciers. So if it's melting, just imagine how much water there would be pouring over this area. Oh, we can see that that's what was happening with these LiDAR maps. Get a load of this shit. Can you see these two clearly water-cut channels coming down out of the Dakotas in Canada? It comes all the way back over here. Look at where Regina is. You can see. Zoom in a little bit more. See if there, a little bit more clarity. You can see the boundary of where the water was flowing down, and then for whatever reason split right here. Keep in mind, green is lower than this cream color. So unbelievable amounts of water were flowing south out of Winnipeg. Just look at that. This is undeniable. Look at over here. That's Lake Nipigon. Why on earth would this feature exist right there if not for an impact flooding out all of that glacial ice rapidly melting in an instant? You got to imagine ocean currents of water is being instantly melted with all of that heat. You can't even begin to imagine how much heat, but you can clearly see that shit flowed out, and there's that debris pile, all of the debris that was there. This was clearly some type of higher ridge. No business for this being there. No business for so much water. Where did the fucking water come from if not for instantaneous glacial melting, backfilling that hole that was just punched through the ice and washing that whole south side out? The fucking debris is sitting right there. It's undeniable, for Christ's sake. Same with these channels cut right here. This is undeniable. All of this stuff, it would have been water just pouring over all of this. And when we'll zoom back in on Nebraska, even on the satellite thing, you can see it. And these aren't small, man. Like, these are some pretty big sized hills. We'll zoom in here on the thing. Yeah, look at that. These are big, and they have no business being in Nebraska. There is no other explanation other than hundreds of feet deep. If these are 50 to 70 feet tall, the water had to have been hundreds of feet deeper on top of that, flowing north. Look at these fucking things. These are clearly deposited by flowing water. And think about how much sediment and debris would be being washed out of Canada and everything north of here, and then being deposited as the water level subsided. Now the sediments can start to settle down a little bit. It's clear as day. So you want to research a little bit more about drumlins? I hope you do, because it's amazing. And like I said, they're everywhere. Everywhere where you have glaciers. Rochester, New York. Look at this. Boom. Everywhere. Rochester, New York. What's up, Drumlin brothers? If anyone from Rochester sees this, you guys are our honorary sister city to Waterloo, Wisconsin. We are the Drumlin twins. Although they clearly, I mean, look at how dense this patch of drumlins are. It is unbelievable. Even over here. Between Clyde and Conquest, it is just ridiculous. And it's the same exact thing. They're all pointing in the same general direction, indicating water was flowing. I mean, yeah, 30 years ago, this would have been hard to believe. We didn't have LiDAR maps. We didn't have Google topographical maps like this. You had to go out in the field. We didn't have drones. You had to rent a fucking helicopter or an airplane if you wanted aerial views. Then you got all the vegetation sitting on top of it, which hides a lot of it. Like looking at the radar or the satellite map, look at, we're zoomed in. If you looked at just this from an airplane or had this view from a helicopter, you would never probably know that any of those drumlins were even here. You'd see some hills and shit, but would you really recognize like, All these hills are orientated in the same direction. They're all these slender, elongated things. Like, what's up with that? It doesn't stand out like a sore thumb until you get the vegetation out of there. Look at the topographical map, and it is clear as day. This is water flowing and flowing fast, baby. It had places to go. Okay, we even see on the LiDAR map here, coming out of Lake Superior, these 2 points, I believe, were the outlets of the subglacial water flooding. Cutting through here for whatever reason, like this was pretty durable right there. But then all of a sudden, it's just everything is just sort of washed out until it teams up over here with this coming down that would eventually turn into the Mississippi. All just washed out. Everything coming down here, washed out. Coming out of Lake Superior, washed out. Converging right here, getting its act together, and then going down. Same coming out of where Green Bay is. So much lower. The darker the green, the lower it is. And it looks like water was just gushing right out of there, hooked right up into the Wisconsin River Valley on its way out. And obviously coming out of the bottom, like I said, the darker the green, the lower the terrain is. So this would have been just boosh, pouring water out all over the fucking place. Desperately. Now it's hooking back up with the Mississippi around here, desperately trying to get the hell out of there. Unbelievable. But that's what makes the most sense to me about drumlins. How they got here, you know, why there's so many, why they're pointed in the same direction. It all makes sense when you say that the pressure of glaciers was sitting on the earth and the water subglacially was like a pressure washer on a global scale or a continental scale, basically trying to get out. But I mean, drumlins do exist in parts of Europe as well. Like, it's not just exclusive. It is where glaciers were, and it seems to be near within 100 miles or so of where the edge of the glacier was. Seems to be where these drumlins are forming. Because again, if it was the glaciers obviously bulldozed their way, so they should have cleared out everything because they ground away 400 million years of topsoil is just gone. There's never been a dinosaur found in Wisconsin because all of that layer of soil is just gone. The glaciers literally scraped it away and removed it. We have 400 to 600 million year old fucking Cambrian era bedrock where it's sandstone and it's limestone made from the shells. Because this back half a billion years ago, where Wisconsin is now, was very close to the equator, and this was under 50 or 100 feet, shallow tropical seas, where all the little sea creatures with calcium shells and whatnot died and just piled up, and we got shitloads of limestone here, and granite and quartz and sandstone. So that's where I'll leave this for today. A little interesting, some tidbits on drumlins. Maybe watch that video again because I like slow motion drone videos. And I think it's just pretty slick how we have a goddamn drumlin in the right field of our baseball diamond. It's just normal. Wait a minute. There's a massive hill there. And wait a minute. There's the outfield. There's the foul pole. You got to climb a hill to get to the outfield fence. And it's only like 260 to right field. Oh, man. Very, very short to right. I don't know why that glitch shows up in the top right corner. But here's another good shot of just how the drumlins are. And if you looked again, like even if you're up in an airplane, like I said, airplane or a helicopter, you're looking out over this, it does not look, even from sort of a bird's eye view, it does not look like these are all pointed in the same direction, does it? It just looks like, hey, there's a lot of hills around here. That's pretty peaceful. Nope. You get rid of this vegetation and get that eye in the sky, clear as day. These are all pointed in the same goddamn direction. And just imagine, subglacial, there's 1,000 or 2,000 feet thick of ice right here, and we are traveling in the flow of the water right now. We're traveling sort of southwestish. So this is exactly the path that the water would have been taking under thousands of feet of ice, under extreme pressure and high speeds. And now here we are looking into the direction that the water would be coming from. So now we're traveling towards the leading edge of this drumlin. And this is just so good at giving you an idea of how big they are and how tall they can get. Because there's a full-on subdivision up here. Dozens of houses are up here. And they didn't even build out the whole thing. Like, this drumlin continues for like 100 more yards or so. Then swinging around it reveals how high up we are. I mean, I couldn't have been more than 20 feet above the treetops. So we're up a good 100, probably at least 100 feet right there. And being that the football field is built into, obviously it's built into a drumlin. So if you were looking from the home stands, so these are the home stands right here on this side. So you're looking into the drumlin, and it's all just solid woods, right? So it was, I don't know, like 96 or 97. Somebody made up a huge banner and tied it up to the trees in the front so you could see it. It said, "Welcome to the jungle." And so even to this day, that was the 90s. To this day, like, a guy I know actually is the announcer for the high school football games, and he'll play "Welcome to the Jungle" often because it's got to be like our de facto theme song. I mean, our football field's built into the side of a fucking drumlin that looks kind of like a jungle up on a hill. It's just pretty cool. Then, of course, this hot rod on a farm that I used to live on. My favorite place on earth, this hill right here. So many fond memories of me and my dog, just peaceful, even sledding. Like I said, the backside, it's steep as fuck part, but even down the front side, when snow tubes became a thing and we could actually afford a snow tube, I think we had like 3 of them at one point. That was fun. You just had to watch out at the end. There was a barbed wire fence at the end, so you had to lay down on your back if you wanted to get under it, or bail out and stop before you hit the fence. But right here, this clearing coming up on the right there, oh, I have such vivid memories, even over 30 years later, of me and my dog just spending the whole day up here, looking at stuff, you know, interesting little creatures running around, field mice, squirrels, chipmunks, all that stuff. We had the occasional foxes creeping around up on this hill. And then, of course, all the bugs and shit under the rocks, just looking like, oh, let's split this rotten tree stump open and see what's in there. And, oh, I love this place so much. And you can see, like, all these dead trees. I think these are all ash trees. We had those emerald ash borers ravage this area. It killed all the fucking ash trees. So weird that the species of bug would harvest the tree to killing it. And it looks like someone just took a drill and drilled thousands of holes in the trunk. Like, I don't... Now they must lay their stupid eggs in there, and then the fucking larvae eat the softer fibers inside the bark layer, but... So yeah, this is south central Wisconsin and our drumlins. But like I said, the drumlins are the same no matter where you go. It's the same shit. Depositional mixture of garbage in different quantities. They're all not the same. Like, ours was like sandy gravel with some clay in there. Some of them are more sand, some are more gravel. It all depends on what sediments that flowing water under pressure under the glaciers was able to accumulate and drag with it, and what ratios. You know, it's a roll of the dice. But around here, they're all pretty much the same. Some of them are good with sand, some aren't. A lot of people have tried to excavate them to get the resources out of them. But again, if it's just a jumble of bullshit, it's not worth it. So yeah, those are what drumlins are. That's what I figured caused the drumlins. Looking at this, whatever the hell happened to rapidly melt the glaciers. Because like I said, this first spike is meltwater pulse 1A. The second spike here coincides with meltwater pulse 1B. And these events, for whatever reason, sprung us out of the glacial shit for the past 100,000, 2.5 million years is how long that ice age lasted. But here's 100,000 years of climate data. You could see it was just seesawing wildly, swinging wildly out of control the whole time. And then whatever happened at this younger Dryas event snapped Earth out, and we have had 10,000 years of the most stable climate Earth has ever seen in its history. So I'm going to repeat again. Don't believe the frenzy that a couple of degrees in warming is going to kill us, or that 400 parts per million of CO2 is going to kill us. I should have had a CO2 chart because I could show you that as well. For most of Earth's history, including the time when life has existed on Earth, CO2 parts per million were well over 1,000. That's just the way it is. It got to a shockingly low amount at the end of the last ice age, almost to the point, if that shit, okay, so we're at 400 parts per million now, and everyone says we're going to die, But if it dips under 180 parts per million, plants can't really maintain, most plants can't maintain photosynthesis. It's just like if all of a sudden Earth's air only had 5% oxygen in it instead of roughly 20%. We'd be fucked. We'd be suffocating. We wouldn't be able to do it. Plants consume carbon dioxide. It's the opposite of what we do. We take in air, breathe out carbon dioxide. They breathe in carbon dioxide, release air or oxygen. It's the same for them. If that CO2 gets too low, they suffocate. And 180 parts per million is that dead zone for most plants. So we're barely above the bare minimum that plants need to survive. And oh my God, everyone on TV we're all dead. We're all going to fucking die. It ain't true, goddammit. I don't know how old most of you are, but if you're like me, 40, I'm be 43 in a couple weeks here. You're 50, 60, 70 years old. Explain in detail how much this has all changed. Storms aren't any more violent if you really consider all the factors. They're really not more frequent. It goes up and down. You can chart back. The Midwest is way more populated now than it was 150 years ago. There's no doubt about that. So Tornado Alley, a lot of people didn't live there. Again, you would stay mostly on the coasts. Most people lived on the East Coast, even 150, 200 years ago when they started recording all of this information. So naturally, in 1868 or whatever, just pick a number, 1890, the amount of tornadoes recorded is going to be different than nowadays, just for the fact that there are millions and millions, tens of millions of more people living in the area of the country that gets almost all of the tornadoes now than there were back then. So it's not that the amount of tornadoes has increased, it's that people are actually in these areas that get most of the tornadoes now, that they can notate like, oh, there's a lot of fucking tornadoes in this area. The whole climate change, that's, again, think about why they don't call it global warming anymore. Because it was supposed to be such a 10-degree temperature change by 2020 and we're all going to die. Heard that shit all throughout the 80s and 90s, man. Over and over and over again. Oh my God, by 2020 it's going to be so hot, nobody can live on Earth. It's the same shit that it has been my whole life. Nothing has changed. So, and this was all based on computer models. They were sending out these alarm bells over computer models. Not even any hard scientific fucking data. Look at this fucking data that's right before your eyes. Would you want to live in a time with these wild swings for hundreds of thousands of years, just wildly out of control? Full glaciation into warmness. Full glaciation, bouncing back and forth. We live in the time of unprecedented climate stability. There is no reason for alarm. Like I said again, because again, you have to repeat things 1,000 times before people will just stop with their own fucking agenda and actually listen to what you're saying. It does not make sense to just pump pollutants into the air that is going to poison us and the other living things that have to breathe it. But more CO2 in the air, we can literally get up to 1,500 parts per million before we start seeing any type of side effects on humans. It's roughly closer to 2,000 parts per million that humans will start having a problem with respiration. So we are nowhere, we're barely over the minimum to maintain plant photosynthesis, for fuck's sake. And everyone wants to act like we're right on the brink of dying. It's bullshit. It's not true. It's fucking trigger words for like liberals and shit. Just like I said before with the MAGA retards, it's just say Hillary's emails. All you gotta do is say Hillary's emails. And these MAGA fucking idiots go into a frenzy. Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. Same fucking thing. Just mention climate change to a fucking liberal. And they're gonna be, oh, we're all gonna fucking die. We're all dead in 20 years. Same fucking thing. Neither instance is true. We're not all gonna die. Some species are gonna make it. Other species are going to evolve to take the place of the ones that didn't make it. Just like it's been doing for about 4 billion years. We'll leave it at that. Fuck the catastrophe. Everything is fear-based now. Fuck all that. Look at it objectively using scientific methods that are tried and true, whether it be carbon dating, ice core samples. Take your fucking pick. You can't just pull shit out of your ass and be like, well, this is my opinion, so this is the way it is. No, You have to fucking look at the evidence. And now we have the technology to make the evidence available to everyone's fingertips. And all you got to do is be willing to look. So keep that in mind. Don't believe anything I say. Don't believe anything the TV says. Adhere to scientific methods. Again, don't just pull shit out of your ass willy-nilly just because that's what you want to believe. Look at what's actually there. Look at the evidence that is actually there and come to a conclusion from that. And when you do, there's no reason to be alarmed. There's no reason to be afraid of anything. Earth has survived, and living creatures have survived things way beyond anything that humans can do. There is literally nothing we can do to this planet that will make it inhabitable. Period. Just can't happen. We just physically can't do it. This isn't a fucking movie. We're not going to destroy things with some carbon dioxide, and we ain't going to fucking terraform Mars either, so get that dumb shit out of your fucking head too. This ain't a movie. This is reality bound by the laws of physics, and all you gotta do is look at that shit objectively with an open mind and let the evidence tell you the conclusion. On that note, good night. I love you all, and I hope to see you again soon.